Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Hind Zaki, and I'm lead for international programs at the Qatar Research Development and Innovation Council. We're just going to give you a quick intro to QRDI and this session. QRDI is the National Research and Innovation Agency, which aims to boost research, development, and innovation activities in Qatar to help the country realize its national goals and ambitions, bringing to life the vision set in the national strategy, QRDI 2030. We're here today to talk about corporate innovation. In today's competitive marketplace, businesses are increasingly looking for new ways to create better products and services to maximize sales. Many leverage various corporate innovation models to achieve accelerated growth. To bring this topic to life, we are lucky enough to have several leaders in this field join us today from Qatar and abroad. Starting with our moderator, Rachel Chalmers.
Thank you so much, Hind, for that kind introduction. I'm the president of Alchemist Accelerator. I founded the corporate and government services business here at Alchemist. Our clients include AWS, NEC, and QRDI. I came to Alchemist from corporate innovation roles with Autodesk. Prior to Autodesk, I was a VC, and I led investments in Docker, Aviatrix, and Honeycomb. I'm delighted to introduce the rest of our distinguished panel. Haya is Innovations Program Director at QRDI. She spends much of her time working with corporate innovation in Qatar, passionately leading efforts to continue strengthening the innovation system. Her career started by building initiatives to support entrepreneurs, including accelerators, a venture fund, and various community initiatives. Haya currently leads programs for large local enterprise to leverage innovation through partnerships, including the Qatar Open Innovation Initiative. Kamran Siddiqui is the Senior Director for Strategy at Ooredoo Qatar. He is responsible for reviewing and updating the corporate strategy and is also responsible for the digital enablement function, which focuses on harnessing the power of digital ecosystem providers around the world to bring innovative thinking and new ways of working to address challenges and opportunities for the company. And Mariano Amartino is the Microsoft Startup Director for Americas, where he runs the startup and VC programs and engagements with investors, entrepreneurs in the ecosystem. Passionate about innovation and startups, Mr. Amartino has more than 7 years leading investment, innovation, and digital transformation units, corporate venture capital, and startup ecosystem relations for corporations across Americas, including the US, Canada, and LATAM, and Europe. Hey, Kamran, Mariano, thank you so much for taking the time today. We are going to jump into the session. As a reminder, you're always welcome to enter questions by clicking the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. As a reminder to panelists, we want to make this an interactive discussion. So as others are talking, you may raise your hand and I'll call on you. Let's begin with Haya. Haya, can you tell us more about the work that you're doing with the Open Innovation Program?
Thank you, Rachel. It's my pleasure to give an overview about the Qatar Open Innovation Program. If you allow me, I'll share my screen and we will jump right in. I know some of our audience are already part of the Qatar Open Innovation community, and I thank them for really being an active part of making. And so thank you for your partnership. Without you, this program wouldn't be possible. The Qatar Open Innovation Program connects opportunity owners who are mainly large local companies and government agencies to innovators. And we do this by finding the opportunities that are defined by the organization as either pain points or areas where they would like to have competitive advantage in their industry. And we find the tech innovators, the startups and SMEs that have solutions that would match the local partners' need. We supplement this partnership with piloting fund and support services from QRDI side. We launched this program earlier this year, and it was mainly inspired by the QRDI 2030 strategy to foster business R&D partnerships in Qatar. So we want to see local entities doing more of the piloting and deploying of innovative solutions, mainly for economic and social impact. And we want to attract the best RDI talent and support them here in Qatar as well. So we do this by focusing on building this bridge and partnerships and collaboration between the opportunity owners and the innovators. Our main objectives in this program are to strengthen our innovation network. We want to build up our research, development, and innovation talent in Qatar, and we want to adopt innovation and really emphasize on Qatar's innovation leadership, where we want to both build and pilot innovations for local, regional, and global use. I'll take you through the open innovation journey. We divided into mainly five activities, where we start by engaging with our corporate and sometimes government partners as well, to build this partnership with QRDI, and start by identifying opportunities. We run ideation workshops where we come up with, then on the second step, we come up with a short list of the top opportunities that have they have most impact for the organization, and it would be fit for an open innovation call. We then frame those opportunities with enough detail to create an issue, an open innovation call, and publish it. We promote it locally and internationally to receive proposals from the best innovators in their field. We proactively approach companies that are innovating in the space, and we invite them to submit proposals for innovations that would meet this need and have room for co-development of a solution that would be piloted in Qatar. And big emphasis on piloting. This is not a procurement exercise for us. We want the companies to be engaged in piloting something that is innovative and cutting edge and suitable for their business needs. We then jointly evaluate those proposals with our corporate partner and select the best company that would co-develop the solution for their needs. And finally, we award the piloting fund and support in the follow-on stages while they're piloting the solution in Qatar. The main services that QRDI provides are workshops for ideation, identification of those innovative opportunities, the issuing of an innovation call to invite innovators to submit their proposals, and reaching that decision to find the most suitable piloting partner, and then providing the funding. These are the main services, but that translates to a lot of back office support, where there is a lot of support from a communication, marketing aspect, legal support for reaching an agreement between the large corporate and sometimes a startup that's providing the innovative solution. We mediate this phase and provide the legal support to finalize and sign an agreement that satisfies both parties. We provide tools and frameworks for the ideation, structuring the call, and validating it. And then we support in publishing those calls. We work closely with intermediaries that are they are best in the field for the open innovation. We ran so far 11 open innovation calls for 5 corporate partners. One of them is Uridu, and I'm happy to hear from Kamran's side about his experience. We have calls for Kahrama, Hasad, and we currently have open calls for Milaha and Sidra in the space of logistics and healthcare. And we received more than 250 proposals so far. And I invite you to check those open innovation calls, especially the ones that haven't closed yet. I invite innovators to submit their proposals and explore partnering with our local corporates. But I also invite our local corporates who are interested in open innovation to reach out to us and hopefully have their calls listed, and we're open to partner with them. I will hand it over back to you, Rachel, and I'm happy to take questions at any stage.
Hey, thank you so much for that comprehensive introduction to an exciting program. Just as a reminder, there is a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We will be monitoring those questions, so please enter them at any time. We'll have 15 minutes of open Q&A at the end of the session, so you can ask questions of these panelists. Let's take a little step back now and talk about innovation more generally. Mariano, I'm going to call on you. What models of corporate innovation exist today? What have you seen out in the field? What's working and what isn't?
Hey, Rachel, thanks for the question and the invitation. There are a couple of models that are working today, and they are moving away from the traditional model that was initiated by Cisco like 30 years ago, or something like that, or maybe Eli Lilly. What's working right now? It's the connection between the corporates and the local ecosystems. Okay, there was an interesting move away from the acquisition part of open innovation to the working with the startups only and just making some very specific partnership with the startups and to a move towards working with ecosystems and growing ecosystems. For instance, in the example that Haya just said, it's super interesting to see how the work with the ecosystem helps within its own objectives on the talent build-up. And that's how you end up growing ideas and talent that you usually don't have access to. Because at the end of the day, the main advantage of open innovation is speed of innovation and new ideas that you are usually not seeing because you're working on your own cone of silence, to use a traditional point of view. But so right now, what's working is including corporates within local ecosystems and expanding those ecosystems through partnerships with accelerators, funds, and local communities. The local communities of practice, for me, are the key right now in these open innovation models.
We're talking a lot about open innovation today. Mariano, what's your definition of open innovation? What do you see open innovation fundamentally comprising?
For me, it's pretty easy. It's the open innovation is when you are sharing your knowledge with outside partners, and when you are able to incorporate the knowledge that it's on the market or the ecosystem, to use a word that I really like. I truly believe in the concept of ecosystem, because when you look at an ecosystem is always evolving, and everyone that is taking part of that ecosystem is evolving. So for me, an open innovation strategy is basically a strategy in which companies are showing what are their pain points, what are their processes and the internal processes that are using to tackle their current problems and how they are trying to solve it. That way, people outside the company is able to understand what are the processes that can be improved or what processes can be completely replaced. And that's how, when you work with startups, the interesting thing is you start having fresh eyes and fresh ideas on your processes. At the end of the day, a lot of innovation comes from not only new products, but new processes and very specific markets that you are tackling.
That makes a lot of sense. Can you point to specific examples of how companies are using these kinds of open innovation to support their efforts?
Yeah, I mean, I can, the main example that I use, even when for me, it's an outdated one because it was based out of acquisitions, was the Cisco model. Cisco, for instance, in the 90s, which for a lot of people, it's like the ancient ages. I have white hair, so it's not so ancient.
Yeah, we were there.
Yeah, so when you look at the growth that Cisco had, that growth was created by acquisitions. And the interesting thing was you are acquiring companies, but you have to work a lot on getting those cultures to fit in your company and how that won't slow you down. When you look at what we are seeing right now, we are seeing specific motions for expanding markets and expanding new solutions. One thing that I really like is how Procter & Gamble is tackling open innovation. Procter & Gamble has an interesting model where they have a KPI on which 50% of the innovation that they bring to the company has to be from outside sources, and that's how you get into the open innovation mantra. The other thing that I saw firsthand at Telefónica is a telco operator based out of Spain and working in Latam and some parts of Europe, is they started creating an accelerator to tackle ideas on how to work with internet startups. But then they started going into deep tech. So they basically took a couple of years approach where you, in the midterm, end up creating a good talent pool where you can start building your innovation. And that's how they end up going after things, very specific things. How can I optimize the data package transition in copper wires? How can I use IoT for connecting water in different parts of the world? And that kind of things now are paying off. When you start, and this is key for open innovation. Open innovation has a lot of speed, but if you take a long-term approach, you will see that at first it gives you some results, but suddenly it starts accelerating and giving you better results.
Thank you. Those are some fantastic examples. And of course, Microsoft itself is no slouch here with the Cisco-like acquisitions of LinkedIn and GitHub and other companies. Yeah.
And honestly, when you look at that, there's an interesting motion around acquisitions. When you talk about acquisitions, is okay, what are the key drivers for my growth and how can I bring growth to my markets, even when I have to start to give them some leeway so they can operate by themselves, and then try to figure out how we can start collaborating and integrating or morphing, or as a Star Trek fan, how can I get the board to incorporate and assimilate the startups? So for instance, LinkedIn right now, it's pretty standalone company, GitHub also, and one interesting thing, Rachel, is how we are working with OpenAI, how OpenAI is pushing the boundaries of artificial intelligence, even when we are not acquire them. We are just supporting that as an open innovation strategy.
Yeah, and even without an acquisition, that process of cultural aggregation has to take place. One of the sticking points for many startups is they come into a large enterprise, they have a successful pilot, but then it's very hard to get past those innovators who are taking a punt on the early stage and penetrate the rest of the organization. So let's turn to Kamran, who's had some insight here. Kamran, do you think Qatari companies are doing enough to harness open innovation for competitiveness?
Thanks for the question, Rachel, and thank you for QRDI for organizing this forum. Are Qatari companies doing enough? You know, when I think about it, overall, the country is taking the proper approach in terms of looking at open innovation. As a country, I think we've got the correct mindset and pretty a really strong structure and support system that's being put in place from the government, as well as being enabled by big corporates like Ooredoo and other Q companies. The overall Qatari startup ecosystem, with the support of entities like QRDI, QFC, QBIC, and QSTP, these have been helping to boost the overall vibrant environment within the country. They've been focused on bringing, universities, big techs, corporate startups, and VCs kind of together to make things happen. So I think overall, the progress has been really good in terms of looking at open innovation. If I give an example like Ooredoo ourselves, it's a pretty widely, it's a huge statistic when I was thinking about it. Over the last 4 years, we've actually gone through and looked at about close to 1,000 different solutions and startups, both internationally as well as here locally in Qatar, whereby they're bringing new innovative technologies and new ideas to Ooredoo. So the key thing over here is that when we're working at Ooredoo, we're not thinking about doing innovation for the sake of innovation. It's always focused on trying to address a particular problem. So when you ask, Rachel, are Qatari companies doing enough? The question basically becomes, what are the Qatari companies trying to use innovation for? Everyone has to kind of think back to their core focus. What is it that they want to use innovation for? And I think this is where Mariano hit the nail on the head, is that companies become very encumbered with their regular day-to-day work and processes, right? It's the same thing here in Ooredoo. If you go talk to the operations team, the marketing organization, the customer care organization, everyone's kind of doing their day-to-day work. So we're looking at innovation to basically bring those new ideas to the table and say, have you thought of X, Y, and Z type of solution? And that in most cases is an eye-opener, because people would not have thought through that. And if they had thought through that, they wouldn't be able to carry it out because it stays as an idea rather than taking that idea into a POC or a pilot. And that's the key thing that I like about innovation, is that you just spark the idea, and there are tons of startups out there, both locally and internationally, that you can very quickly work with to take that inception to basically a running pilot. And then it basically just ignites a fire under people to see that I've done a pilot. And this is back to Mariano's point, that our procurement cycles would be pretty long to kind of develop these ideas from start to end. I mean, as a telco, as any Fortune 500 company, we've got a decent amount of bureaucracy within the organization. But if you end up using open innovation, that cuts across all of those different cycles. The length of those cycles can be shortened significantly by working with the startups, bringing them in through a pilot phase, and then seeing how the technology or the solution can be adapted to the problem or challenge at hand. So overall, I think we've had, I would say, very good success. I mean, when I think back to about more than 1,000 startups having been evaluated over the course of 4 years, that unto itself is a pretty big achievement for us. And we do have a lot of those actually in implementation mode also. So that's also a key thing that I would highlight, is that it's not just looking at startups for the sake of startups. We do actually go ahead and implement quite a few of those solutions. Then this is where we're also looking forward to the work with QRDI. We've got 2 innovation calls with QRDI right now, and we're hoping in the next few weeks and months we'll be able to take those into a pilot stage as well.
That's very exciting to hear. Ooredoo has been using this open innovation process for some time now. Can you tell us what lessons you've learned? Tell us about some of your successes, and if you will, some of the challenges that you've experienced through the process.
So I would highlight 2 things over here. First, the concept of innovation has to fit within the overall strategy of the organization. So ultimately, as I was saying earlier, you need to ask yourself, what's the benefit from doing this, and how does it enable the overall strategy for the company? So I wear 2 hats here in Ooredoo, right? I kind of look after overall strategy, and I've also got digital enablement. So anything that we're trying to do with regard to digitizing or doing digital transformation for the organization fits and dovetails very nicely with my other hat, which is around corporate strategy. So we very often ask, if we're moving increasingly into the digital arena, how does innovation help us? And for us, it's really important because all of these transitions that we're moving, whether it's on optimizing customer care, whether it's on optimizing our technology areas, network rollouts, or even thinking about monetizing new opportunities of growth, all of those things fit within our overall strategy, and open innovation helps us answer those questions. Secondly, you also have to, this is a key learning for us, is that you need to put in place certain mechanisms for how the innovation can, all the benefits with innovation, how those can be measured. So whenever we do a pilot or a POC, we need to put certain goals in place, and we need to be able to monitor those or measure those achievements for those goals. So only then can we actually identify, was that pilot successful? So when we start working with the various different business units in the organization, we'll work with them first to identify what's the challenge at hand. And if we are bringing a particular solution or a startup to the table to help address that challenge, how are we going to measure the improvement, or how are we going to measure that that challenge has been resolved over the course of the pilot? So what are the KPIs that we need to be looking at, and during what that time frame happens to be? And then at the end of the time frame, did we meet those KPIs? Because ultimately, for us and for the business unit in Ooredoo, that's the true test or the true measure of success. Did the pilot actually do what it was set up or what it was meant to have done in the beginning? So that's it. I would say a key learning for us is first, set in place those goals. When you talk about some of the challenges, for me, one of the things is, I think Mariana also touched upon this, is small startups, when they come in work with Ooredoo, there's a cultural change or a cultural shift. We've worked with some startups based out of Silicon Valley, right? And now, barring the geographic proximity or lack thereof, time differences is one thing, cultural norms is a second thing, having people on the ground is a third thing. So these all become challenges, but if you believe that the solution is viable and the solution actually provides benefit to Ooredoo, we will work with the startups to work through those challenges as well. So Silicon Valley, we're looking at about a 12-hour time difference. We've had to work days over or nights over here, days over there, similarly vice versa. But that kind of works out because we know that we have to resolve the particular challenges at hand. And there have been some teething issues also whenever you work with some of the startups, because to get them integrated into our back-end systems, we are a large behemoth when it comes to technology infrastructure. And some of the startups would want to, on a very agile basis, just get up, run, and go, right? But you got to fit them within our security protocols, within our back-end infrastructure. So that has always been a challenge. But we work through that also, and it's a few times that you end up doing it, you learn those experiences, and it just ends up becoming easier the next few times around.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Let's turn back to Heya, and we've got a bunch of wonderful questions in the Q&A. But before we turn to those, Heya, how can organizations in Qatar adopt open innovation, and what support can QRDI provide?
That's a very good question. So adopting open innovation in an organization, any organization, whether in Qatar or elsewhere in the world, it requires the support of the leadership of this organization. And we would need a champion within the organization to work with. So Kamran and his team are great support, and they're with us as true partners, where we work together on figuring things out. As you know, with innovation, it's not going to be completely straightforward when it comes to defining success and failure, how we, on what metrics we select the company and so on. So we do need the leadership support and the involvement of a true champion from the partner organization. And we secure that through also a mutual agreement with QRDI, and then we move on to identifying what areas they want to list as innovation calls. So our emails are on the QRDI portal, and that's a good first step. If you don't know us already in person, it would be a good first step to drop an email, and we can get started on our usual process.
Fantastic. Let's turn to the audience questions, lots of exciting ones. The first is from Yosri Ben Salah. How is it possible to automate the aspects of the open innovation process like matching? Is that something that's feasible? Is that something that you've already implemented? How useful can automation be?
Having gone through this, I think the matchmaking process does require a little bit of hand-holding and discussions with various different pitch sessions, the startups presenting to a company like Ooredoo or one of the other larger corporates to highlight their solutions. So automating that, I'm not so sure how easily that can be done. If you think about a funneling process, to me, you can basically do the automation from identifying certain keywords, and if those match to the problem or challenge at hand, that might be one way or initial way of doing it. But I think when you narrow it down, you do need to sit down with the solution providers, with the startups, to actually walk through their solutions. They need to be able to convince you, they need to be able to express to you how that particular solution will address either the opportunity at hand or the challenge at hand. So not so sure how automation can kind of, maybe, I don't know, Mariano, if you have any insights whether people have actually done this on an automation basis, or if Haya, I would love to take that also into account as we go forward with our innovation calls.
I'm just thinking if it's possible to automate, I would not prefer to go with that option either, mainly because whoever gave us their time and thoughts to put together a proposal to partner deserve the time and effort for us to go through it and read it in details and meet with the applicant to ask any detailed questions. So even if there was an automation option, I think I will still go and read everything.
Yeah, Mariano.
Yeah, it's. I mean, both Carmen and Haya said almost anything, but it's super difficult to automate, because how sometimes there's a fantastic product or a fantastic idea that has not been well described, or maybe it's as as Carmen said, there are cultural differences where you are not able to express really what they are expecting from you. And so that's kind of difficult. And this is one of the challenges that you start facing when you create these kind of calls, especially if you have thousands of startups like Carmen and Haya said. It's how do you scale the ability to read every single one, understand the value that they can add, and how you can connect them to the internal knowledge that will lead you to a better implementation or to a good implementation, okay, or a good solution. So I think it's difficult to create an automation for the matching process, okay?
Yeah, it's almost a question of what computers are good at versus what humans are good at. Computers are good at simple, straightforward, yes, no questions. Humans are much better with the sticky, nuanced, subtle stuff. Even granted OpenAI, computers still struggle with those kinds of details. Thank you all so much. A question specifically for Haya, but I'll encourage the others to jump in as well, from Murad Uzani. Can you elaborate more on the role of research institutes like QCRI in what you do, and how QCRI can be involved?
I think our research institutes and research institutes globally as well have great value to add to partner with companies that can deliver those solutions that our corporate partners are looking to solve. So in our local ecosystem, there is a strong preference from our opportunity owners to contract with a company that will deliver the solution. But that just means that the local research institutes have a great opportunity to spin off or license those solutions to companies that can fully serve the corporates in Qatar. So I'm a big fan of all the research institutes locally and the great talent that we have, and I know that they have a lot to offer. And the right mechanism for our corp today is to deliver this value through a company.
Yeah, we've certainly seen the research and commercial partnership very powerful in all kinds of other regions, including Australia with the CSIRO and here in Silicon Valley with SRI and Park. Mariano, Cameron, do you have anything to add here?
One thing I would say is that, yes, I mean, we would be happy to work with QCRI, and we've actually been involved with the likes of Qatar University as well. But it's very research-oriented, research-focused. We would prefer to have looked at more startups or companies that actually have a business model in place. In a way, how do you interact with them on that basis? When you start getting more research oriented, it will be very cutting edge. And the problem with the cutting edge with companies like Ooredoo would be, we can't invest in a research grant or something like funding a research opportunity, because that doesn't quite fit within our overall strategy. We would rather be working with a startup that is looking to solve a particular issue or a challenge or help in terms of monetizing an opportunity for us. So from that standpoint, while the research institutes can be very cutting edge, we'd have to still come back to how does it eventually solve a particular problem at hand that we're trying to resolve.
And on my experience, it's interesting because we are seeing the same. Basically, when you have a research institute, what they do is in different parts of the world, okay, there are different models, but usually it's basic science or basic implementations of really good research that maybe have a lot of time to be part of a commercial or a solution or a product, okay? So I truly believe that a good strategy is help and support the the research institutes to better understand how they can work on transferring technology, how can make a better work on understanding how they can transfer that the technology or the basic research that they are doing. And when I say basic, is basic science, not because it's simple, okay? It's very basic research, how they can transfer that and work together with the R&D departments of large companies. Okay, that will be the best way to work with them.
I'm going to clump together a group of questions from our listeners that all seem to be related. One listener asks, individual innovators are not allowed to submit their proposals for challenges. Why? Another is asking, is it possible to partner with international companies to submit proposals for listed opportunities? And a third is very keen as an international partner to work with you. Hey, can you talk about these different models from individual to international companies applying for these open innovation calls?
Certainly. I think with the case of individuals applying to the open innovation challenges is the same as the case with research institutes. The individual might have the best ideas and the best capabilities, but what the local corporates would require is a company that they can contract with to receive the funding and deliver the innovation or the co-development project to them. So an individual can put together a team in a company and they're welcome to submit an application. In the case of international companies, we welcome local and the global companies to submit proposals, actually companies of all sizes. So yeah, even we did have cases of group of companies submitting one proposal where they have complementing capabilities, and that really works for us.
Kamran, of the 1,000 startups that you've looked at, what proportion do you think were international versus local?
The majority will be international because we've also worked with other ecosystem providers out in the US, and they end up bringing those startups to the table. That being said, there are quite a few that we work with here in Qatar as well. It's a slightly different engagement model with the companies here in Qatar relative to what we're working with and the other ecosystem provider out on the West Coast. Over here in Qatar, it'll be more focused on, the companies. I like to kind of think of it from a inside out innovation versus outside in. So with the companies in Silicon Valley and Europe, it's very much of an outside in approach for Ooredoo. We're taking those ideas, bringing them into Qatar. With the companies here through QDB and QVIC, we're working with more of an inside out approach, whereby we're, as part of the program, the Digital and Beyond program with QDB, we're helping to kind of incubate those startups, and they can try out their solutions with us within Ooredoo, but their larger goal is to go out there on a wider regional and global stage. So the opportunity is for us to help grow the overall entrepreneurs within Qatar, those types of startups, right? But we will look at those also. Obviously, their technologies or their business models might be a little more nascent than the companies that we work out with in Silicon Valley. But that's a different approach for the local startups versus the companies out west.
Thank you.
But all in all, I think we've had varying levels of success with the 1,000, and the majority of those 1,000 would be the international startups. We've had varying levels of not just success, but how should I say, the level of engagement, the business model that those companies have brought to the table. Some are very ready to run, and some not so.
Yep. Mariano, how have you seen other geographic regions like Qatar balance that tension between the international companies and growing the local ecosystem?
Well, it takes, let me take Latin America as an example. It takes a lot of effort because at first you have to rely on international startups and international role models, because at the end of the day, you are trying to build up a community or an ecosystem. And when you look at, for instance, what Chile did with Startup Chile, they created this open innovation hub for corporates, but also they created this accelerator house or hub for startups, and they were accepting startups from all over the world, because that was the only way where they could attract talent, and they were able to find new ideas for an ecosystem that was really small. I mean, you were talking about a region that was less than a couple of million of people. So at that point, you have to find the balance on how you attract and what you offer to your international companies and the international talent. And at the same time, how do you help that talent connect and help your local talent to start absorbing knowledge and start competing? When you look at that specific example, for instance, you realize that after 7 years, Chile, which is one of the smallest countries in Latam, after giants like Brazil or Mexico, or traditional powerhouses like Argentina and maybe Colombia, right now they had a lot of unicorns and a really thriving VC ecosystem in Chile. Something that 10 years ago, maybe 12 years ago, you haven't even thought about. So it's a complete balance, but you have to attract international talent, because you have to rely on new knowledge to form.
Thank you. A couple of questions for Heya, asking about the funding available to winners of the Open Innovation Challenges.
In the initial phase for the pilot, we are allocating up to $100,000 per project for the first few months of the project while they develop the pilot and hopefully test it locally in Qatar.
Thank you. And are there biotechnology opportunities aside from the SIDRA call for the diagnostic monitoring device? Do you see a lot of opportunities for biotech companies in Qatar?
We are currently working with some government entities where there is a chance of launching some biotech, healthcare-related opportunities, and even in agriculture that might end up being also biotech. So keep an eye out for future opportunities. Hopefully in the coming month or so, we'll have new ones launched.
Fantastic. Watch this space. A question for all our panelists. How do you define the relationship between open innovation and intellectual property? And is the current legislative regime in Qatar supportive of open innovation?
For us, in terms of how we work with the startups, the IP is with the startup, right? So it's not like we're not making an acquisition of the company. We're working with a company similar to how we would, let's say, work with a Microsoft or a Cisco. So it is a company partner relationship or a vendor relationship. So no questions on the IP. The startup owns the IP, and we're not looking to acquire that IP. We just want to make sure that the solution is creative, it's innovative, it works with minimal effort, and it basically resolves or addresses the challenges that we have on board.
This one's for Mariano. We talked about open innovation, and you and I ended up talking about some acquisitions. Murad Uzani is asking, are open innovation and acquisitions the same thing, or is one a larger example of the other?
Acquisitions are just one of the strategies that you can include within open innovation, and it's basically part of the open innovation because the knowledge and the products that are acquiring have been developed or created outside your company. That's why you talk about acquisitions within the open innovation umbrella. And then sorry if I can elaborate on the second part of the question is when Murad, I hope I'm pronouncing it well, when Murad asked about examples of smaller scale companies, what I would say is it's the smaller companies or SMBs are usually working on a more broadly defined open innovation scope, because to have a strategy of open innovation, you have to have resources, you have to have a big structure, a structure big enough to have inside innovation, and that kind of creates, that creates, for having an open innovation strategy, you usually have to be a large company. It's kind of difficult for a startup to be open when usually your core is open by definition.
Another question for Hea. When you're running the open innovation challenges with the opportunity owners in Qatar, what is the specific role of the startups or innovators? Do they only procure products and services, or do they work jointly with companies like Ooredoo? Do they share technology investments? Do they share knowledge?
I think with the open innovation calls that we published so far, the biggest role of the startups and SME and innovators in general is to share the knowledge and propose possible solutions that would fit the nature of the call. And once selected, they would become a partner with the corporates where they do the knowledge sharing and the collaboration for the co-development of the solution. So it starts out by sharing an idea and ends up with a partnership that we hope that would translate to acquisition, commercial contract, or further development in Qatar.
Thank you. A question for Kamran from Yo Francis. What KPIs did you use for your pilot open innovation products? And what constitutes a good return on investment for Ooredoo?
So it depends, I guess, on the particular POC or the particular pilot. As I was saying earlier, each pilot comes with its own different set of KPIs that we like to evaluate. But you set those KPIs at the beginning as the goal of the pilot. In the case of, I'll give you an example. Let's say we ran a pilot on smart energy. So the purpose of the pilot was to see how we can reduce the energy consumption. So I'm sitting in Ooredoo Tower, if anyone knows where that is, out in West Bay in Doha. So the idea was, how do you reduce energy consumption within the tower, and how do you, by nature of that, pay less in terms of your electricity bills, right? So that's a standard case where you have certain KPIs tied to financial metrics. When you implement the solution, what we were looking at was what would be the actual cost of the solution. The solution had quite a few different IoT sensors that were placed around the building. The solution itself, the platform that we were looking to run the pilot on, and then basically what you're monitoring is, before the solution was implemented, what was the energy consumption and the electricity bills. During the pilot, where we were tweaking the sensors and monitoring the energy consumption, how did the energy consumption go down? And we ran that for a good, I'd say 4 months. So during that time frame, we also normalized for seasonality. You measure that, and then you come out with what was the true energy consumption from the pilot vis-a-vis before the pilot was implemented. that can essentially translate into Qatari riyal saved, and then you weigh that relative to the actual cost of the solution. So this was a pilot, right? But we were able to prove the business case that the energy consumption, the savings in the energy consumption, essentially are able to provide for the cost of deployment of the solution. And then we can take that and look to basically implement it on a large scale basis within the organization. But that's just one example of saying that the business case needs to be developed based on key metrics, and then the startup has helped to develop that business case. And then you go forward and prove to management that we should go ahead and invest in that solution on a large scale basis, or full scale basis rather. So the KPIs will vary depending on the nature of the pilot or the nature of the solution that we're trying to implement.
Thank you. We're getting a lot of energy from the audience about research institutes. Ahmed Elman-Garib wants to push back on the idea that RIs can only produce basic research, or that only large companies can produce tech and products. And Murad wants to add that there have been examples of direct tech transfer, including CSRO and SRI, which I mentioned. Mariano, I'm going to throw this one to you. Do you want to elaborate on your answer about research institutes?
Yeah, sure. And sorry if I got lost in translation, or if I wasn't clear. There is a couple of things. The first thing that I would stress is that research institutes have the ability to do basic science research that you usually don't have as a core research within a company. That's one of the things that I wanted to stress. Okay, that's something that it's core to the research institutes, because the research institutes usually are not chased by the quarterly or yearly revenue targets that we are usually bound by. And the second thing is, I completely agree with you that there are a lot of products that can be developed within research institutes. The main example that I usually use is the Velcro tape. Velcro tapes were developed by the space exploration, and then they were expanded by commercial companies. But again, the idea of basic research or basic science does not preclude the ability of research institutes to create fantastic products. Okay, so that would be one thing. Thanks.
Heya.
We have in Qatar some fantastic research institutes, including the Qatar Computing Research Institute, that produce innovative products and great knowledge that come with the development of those products. And I have no doubt of their ability, or our local research institute's abilities, to answer an open innovation call and produce fantastic solutions. But bringing to the table the large corporates' concerns, once this solution is produced, who's going to deploy it? Who's going to maintain it? Who's going to look after my needs as a large corporate going forward? The local corporates would feel more comfortable if this solution is packaged in a company that they can interface with going forward. So the local research institutes, the universities, and all researchers are welcome to share their fantastic ideas through the program in collaboration with an industry partner, which would make it an appealing case for corporates to take up their solutions in this commercialization.
Another pair of matched questions. One listener asks, Kamran mentioned that cultural differences are a key challenge. Is it one of the major challenges? Another asks, how did QRDI initiate open innovation with all of these very heterogeneous partners? was there a big mindset shift required? How do you face these cultural challenges, and how do you achieve that mindset shift?
I would say in our case, in the case of Ooredoo, what we've had the learnings, right? So yes, I would say that initially there were cultural barriers or basically challenges that we had to overcome. And definitely I'm not talking about cultural in terms of demographics or things like that. It's basically the companies based out of Silicon Valley, very fast, nimble, agile, ready to turn on a dime, right? Unfortunately, here we are with Ooredoo. We've got our back-end infrastructure that has been developed since the early 2000s. It's 20 years old, legacy IT infrastructure. How do you fit it into all of that? Those are the types of challenges that we will run into. The other one is most likely you will find startups that are eager to, they're really passionate about their solutions, but sometimes when the solutions are being implemented or are being piloted and then we try to implement it on a large scale basis, that's when you realize that those startups may not have the ability to scale up appropriately. So they're very good for running a pilot or a POC, but when we need to deploy them on a large scale basis across all our retail shops, as an example, it may not be that feasible or that readily feasible. So that's where I was talking a little bit about the cultural challenges that we run into. In terms of working with Haya and with QRDI, I mean, I'll let Haya answer that as to how they picked Ooredoo. But I would say that we're, as being one of the technology leaders within Qatar, we're eager to kind of adopt newer technology because we want to be at the forefront of cutting edge technology as long as it helps address the challenges that we have within the organization, as long as it fits within our overall corporate strategy. So.
And in reference to Rachel's question about how we deal with this perceived cultural difference between the corporates and the innovators, we try to be the translators, if you will, between those two types of entities. And we understand the needs of our corporate partners. We understand the nature of startups and local and international companies. So we try to speak both languages and make this initial interaction work. So Ooredoo has the expertise in doing this, but we see this kind of initial misunderstanding between two different types of organizations as our daily tasks to work with. So this is the beauty of, this is why we do what we do.
On that note, could opportunity type ideas originate from startups? Is startup collaboration an alternative open innovation process?
So we had some opportunities originate from startups that see a need in the market and they're seeking to partner with larger companies. And in those cases, we do go back to our corporate partners and check if this is something that they have high on their agenda and they'd like to explore. But I'm interested to hear from Mariano and Cameron if they saw any other forms of SME open innovation.
I haven't really seen that. I mean, to be honest, we would work with the various different ecosystem providers here in Qatar and outside. So whether you come in through QRDI with a viable solution and with something really creative and innovative, or you come from the startup community here in Qatar, we're more than willing to work with the appropriate types of entities over here. As far as SME to SME goes, I mean, I haven't seen that so far with the types of companies that we have worked with, either coming in through Cubic or through the ecosystem providers out west, Silicon Valley.
Specifically on startup open innovation, I think that and reading the other questions, sorry Rachel about that, but I think that's the core of a lot of things that we see as innovation on the startup ecosystem, and fintech is one of the main or at least one of the great examples that you can see. When you are working in an economy that it's basically open APIs left and right, you are able to build new solutions without the deep technical knowledge that maybe you needed to create embedded fintech products on your company. So for instance, let's say I run a core banking system on the cloud, or I run some type of risk analysis system on the cloud. I can tap into that system, and through open APIs, I can develop a lending process or a lending product, or I can create a credit card or debit card company that I can use to expand my business. Or let's say I'm a crypto company that I take crypto investments, or I sell crypto to people. How can I create my own credit card with the off-ramp transactions so people can use their crypto to buy in local currency or in global currency across the world? That I would use any one of the several startups across the world to do that. So for instance, I invested in a very small company called Velo in Argentina that basically they are connected to other 3 startups, and the startup open innovation on an API age, it's fantastic, and it's working super well.
That's wonderful to hear. We've tried to get through as many of your questions as we possibly can, but we're coming close to time. So I'm going to call on our great panelists to give us your closing remarks, your final thoughts. Is there anything you wanted to bring up that we haven't covered yet? I'll start with Mariano.
Oh, no, honestly, what I would say is, if you're a startup, let me give you some advice that already Haya and Carmen gave. Is if you're a startup and you're trying to grow your business, and thinking in the open innovation calls for you could be critical, because that will give you the fastest exposure to all the customers and markets that a traditional company has, and you will have to spend months or years in trying to get them. So what I would say is, open innovation, it's a fantastic strategy for startups to grow their business. And at the same time, for corporates, well, we already said that it's a fantastic opportunity to discover new ideas and create new business opportunities.
Thank you, Mariano. Kamran?
I think I would echo the same thing that Mariano has said, that for a corporate like us, where we're completely bogged down in our day-to-day work and don't have time to breathe and think beyond of the next week's or the next quarterly results, getting a breather and looking at open innovation is a great opportunity to get some new, fresh thinking to the table. It helps, even if let's say we do not do a particular pilot, and this is the case that we kind of highlight to our business units within Ooredoo, is that even if we do not enter into a particular pilot with one of the startups that we're looking to explore, at least the learnings based on the solutions that they've pitched to us is valuable. That unto itself helps the business units get their minds out of the day-to-day grind and think about a broader broader solution that they would never have thought about. That's for us as a corporate. The second thing I would basically say is for the startups, the key for them to be working with the large corporates like an Uridu or a Hassad or a Baladna or a QP would be the level of patience that you need to work with large corporates. It's very easy to be thinking about the agile and nimble way of approaching things because the startups are not encumbered by legacy platforms or legacy thinking. But that's where, you know, the two need to kind of come together. And there's a little bit of patience from the side of the startups and a little bit of guys in the corporates. We need to be thinking about moving faster. But there's a balance. All I would like to highlight.
Thank you. And last but not least, Haya.
I think the best insight I can share with you and the audience is that I saw the most genuine interest from our local corporates to launch those calls, meet with the companies, evaluate each proposal, and work with the best. Everyone is incentivized to make this work, and we at QRDI want to see this locally empowered, globally connected innovation ecosystem. And we see it today, and we hope to continue to see it. And based on that, I invite startups, SMEs, and organizations in and outside Qatar to be part of the Qatar Open Innovation Program, either as opportunity owners or as innovators.
Thank you. And thanks to all of our distinguished panelists. It's so exciting to see the work that's being done to glean the best of both worlds from the startup ecosystem and from large corporations. Haya, Kamran, Mariano, thank you so much for your time. It's been amazing. To our wonderful audience, thank you for some incredible questions. I'm sorry we didn't get to all of them, but we answered as many as we could. We would love it if you would answer a short survey. We always want to make these programs better and better. Your feedback is incredibly valuable to us. Sarah has posted the link to the survey in the chat. Please take a couple of minutes of your time to fill that out. Thanks again to our wonderful panelists and to our audience, and I hope you all have a wonderful and productive and innovative day.
Thank you.